particular. And now Wax is essentially a blockchain ecosystem. So it's not only a protocol blockchain, but then all of the microservices necessary to run a marketplace. So you've got, the accounts, the NFTs, the trading, obviously, and random number generation on chain, which is a feature we've just pushed out, which is really important for
Provably
folks.
fair gaming is what
fair.
the blockchain can
it's
enable
huge
as well.
Most of these applications have some random aspect to it, and everyone's writing their own random number generation over and over and over. So we've put one on chain that now you can see and know that it's provably fair. Our test net has been live for almost a year to date, and it's doing about $1 million a day in transaction volume. So annualized, about 400 million, about 500,000 transactions a day. And our mainnet goes live in 2 weeks, June 30th. So yeah.
It is an interesting concept, getting people on to understanding how you can trade and own digital assets. You did that with Opskins. And Opskins, you guys were doing how much? What's the trading revenue on the Opskins system?
Yeah. So Opskins has been and still continues to be a very successful business. We've done about 150 million transactions on that platform. Over $2 billion of transaction revenue.
What was the most highest value asset that's ever been bought or sold on Opskins?
So the most expensive item was a skin from CSGO, went for $61,000, which has recently been dwarfed by, CryptoKitties, and then F1 just sold a $100,000 plus item. I feel like we're having skin inflation.
Digital assets is what he's saying. Someone paid $100,000 for a unique digital asset, and this is just the beginning of these things. Being able to own unique digital assets, put them into gaming, it will be a major part of the business, and being able to own those independently through open source communities is what we're trying to do. So the next gentleman up, Chris Chapman, is a part of Blockade. Blockade has a game platform called Neon District. It is one of the most beautiful games, I think, in the blockchain space. And they've gone into their test network. They've started selling items within that. Tell us a little bit about Neon District.
Yeah, so Neon District is a cyberpunk strategy turn-based RPG. We mashed all the words together. It's great. It's
cyberpunk strategy turn-based RPG.
It's reminiscent of the old school Final Fantasy, where you've got a team of guys, and you're fighting against team guys, and it's the turn-based strategy. The fun part about it is it's like when you think of blockchain games, you typically think of sort of the lighter weight web-based experiences, right? Well, we wanted to make something that was the exact opposite of that. Because blockchain has such a hard on-ramp for users, we decided to focus on smoothing that out. And so to start playing, you don't have to have a wallet, you don't have to have MetaMask, you don't have to do any of this really hard stuff around blockchain. It's a username and password, really, is all it is.
So the evolution of blockchains is what's important. I mean, we only had programmatic blockchains. We've only had them for the past 5 years, effectively. And creating easier user experience is what it's what the next 5 years is going to be all about.
Yeah, and it's all about that. And we're leaning into it. So we've taken that, and then we're just going even further with all the beautiful aspects of it, right? The game is gorgeous. Our artists are incredible. And so it's very cinematic as it starts. And it is a gorgeous experience. And behind the scenes, you don't even know, but there's blockchain, which means all of your assets you're playing with are all, you can push them out to mainnet and sell them in all the open marketplaces and do anything you want. And since it's a free-to-play game, you can actually bring your assets in, build them up, grind for stuff, add value, have fun, because you're playing. And then when you're done playing, you're like, I'm just gonna go push this out on the marketplace.
So this actually, to me, is one of the more important parts of what I think life will be like for revenue and value generation in at least Southeast Asia for the next 5 years. Them understanding how to grind out value in these games, and them being able to then turn that value into something real world, like a boba tea.
Yeah.
When I explain it to people, I talk about 9-year-olds in South Korea playing mobile games, generating value, creating higher asset digital goods, being able to then sell those on marketplaces to the new oncoming users from America, from the western states and countries.
And then what's it called when you turn time into value?
Exactly.
What is that? It's a job.
It's a revenue generation event, right? So ultimately, these kids will be able to then use their mobile phones, purchase items in the real world space, and mothers all around the world will have their jaws drop when they understand that their child now can generate value out of something that they like to do, and it's going to be hard to tell them not to. And then the rest of the kids worldwide, once they recognize that people are generating value, they're not going to play games where you can't generate value. That will seem silly to them. So, moving into a platform, moving into the usability of these networks is very important. The next gentleman, Everett Carney, is an independent gaming developer. He's worked a lot in the social space as well, but he's working on a platform called Crossworlds. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Crossworlds, Everett?
Hey everyone. So Crossworlds is a studio where we're going to be releasing 3 games for mobile devices. Our first game is a competitive tower defense, and the idea here is if anyone's played the old like Wintermall Wars games from Warcraft 3 or any of the old tower defense maps, we're trying to harken back to that and bring that back up as a somewhat of a lightweight esport where we'll have weekly tournaments, on-chain matchmaking. Players are able to like see who's in the tournament, what their position is, all these kinds of different things.
What I think really is amazing about his platform is his use of cards and generating value through unpacking cards that he uses. So in a similar way to Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, you open up these card generation packs and you can build value. So as a part of this, parts of it are luck in what you draw, parts of it is grinding through and then converting them back into these space dust to be able to buy other goods along the network. So it's an amazing platform, and it's open to developers to build upon using that engine.
Yeah, so we have what's called the Universal Inventory System, which basically converts your on-chain NFTs into different items based on the game that you're playing, rather than trying to take one item from a game and import it into another game where it might not belong. The other thing that happens is all of the game rules actually live on-chain as well, so players can propose balance changes at 2-week intervals and control the flow and the direction that the games that they play are going. So you retain value in terms of the items that you can acquire, in addition to being able to drive the actual development and design of the game that you enjoy. So you have full control in a very decentralized manner. We basically launch a shell of a game and give it to our community to drive forward.
Yeah, continue to move the platform in a way that they'd like to see. It's a partial ownership, partial voting election on these organizations that can help drive and create value. One of the more recent platform games and gaming studios that very highly anticipated, John Linden, is Mythical Games. Mythical Games is a platform that is primarily building on EOS and will be multi-blockchain, I believe, but the beauty of the games and the designer level and the passion and the experience of the team that you guys bring together is incredible. Tell these people a little bit about why you decided to move into the blockchain space and where you came from.
Yeah, no. So we were formerly we were in a lot of these E3s with Activision on Call of Duty and games like that, and we really started watching some of these digital ownerships, right? The concepts a lot of these people have been doing for a while, and CryptoKitties came out, and there's really something fascinating about the idea of ownership, and I don't necessarily know if things like item interoperability and things like that are going to be around anytime soon. I think it's a much further out vision that a lot of people have, but just the idea of having that ownership and being able to trade it or exchange it or kind of tear it apart or whatever you want to do is very, very powerful. And I saw personally when CryptoKitties had come out, I dropped a few $100s on cats saying, what the hell did I just do? Honestly, like, why did I do this? But what you end up finding out is it's because you have a choice as a consumer, right? You have an idea, you don't have buyer's remorse. I didn't buy shards that I can't do anything with. So a few seconds later, I can actually go back and maybe I profit off of it or maybe I don't, but I have a decision as a consumer to make that choice. And I think that's the really powerful thing about where this is heading, is it starts changing the game economics, right? You start giving the power back to the players, and the players can now actually participate within the game economics alongside the game developers, alongside content creators. And that's what gets really, really fascinating, is having new mechanics, that kind of a new palette of tools that as a game developer you can build with. Right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe loot boxes wouldn't be so so bad if we actually had ownership and being able to sell and trade some of these items. And like you said, you really are able to vote with your hearts, vote with your appreciation. So the value creation and removal comes based on the community, ideal decisions and what they want. And so really connecting the developers more so to the end users and allowing them to be more part of that community. So tell them a little bit about your game that we're all anticipating.
So we have a game coming out later this year called Blanco's Block Party. So it's a social MMO kind of set in the world of vinyl toys. So we love the idea of vinyl toys. There's a lot of them at the conference here. If you think about vinyl toys, they started off as blank objects, right? A lot of times they'd sell blank vinyl toys and artists would take them and paint them and make them their own and resell them out to their audience. And we thought that was a great metaphor, and plus we just really like vinyl toys too. I mean, that's a big part of it. But we want to put out a kind of console PC game, which we're coming out with. So initially on PC, and there'll be some announcements a little bit later for other platforms. But it's basically a full-on game, full 3D social MMO, sandboxy type game that we're really excited about. So you can check out some trailers online right now.
So yeah, Blankos, Blankos,
yes.
And interesting you just mentioned this, that we had or seen a console game yet that works with blockchain interoperability. Maybe Andy, you can answer that question. Maybe not. I don't know if we have. John, are you aware of anyone that's done this yet?
I know there's some indies that are playing around with it, but nothing's been announced quite yet at the full level.
Right,
it's coming.
Also, so on the funding of the company, you didn't go through an ICO. You went through VC investment from the EOS network.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about what EOS is and what excites you to be working on that network.
Yeah, so we did a traditional venture capital round. We raised some money from Galaxy Digital as well as some traditional VCs out of Silicon Valley. But yeah, so we're not doing our own token. We think that's great for people that want to do that. That's just not necessarily our thing right now. We really are focused on the assets on the chain. EOS is one of the chains out there we really like because a lot of that complexity is kind of hidden from the users, which I think is really important. So we're not necessarily going to be writing every single thing to the chain. But if you have an EOS wallet, everything will be written to the chain at that point. So it's a way for people to jump into blockchain. I think it's probably the easiest way I've seen so far for people to participate in that world. And that's one of the things we like. As developers, we view it as kind of like AWS or Google Cloud. You don't necessarily have to have an AWS account to use an e-commerce website. It's the same type of thing. We don't think you necessarily have to have a wallet to play a game. If you have a wallet and you want to do things, then that's great. And EOS, I think, really allows us to do a lot of that. Obviously, there's other great things with transaction fees and things like that are very, very favorable to build on. But we think it's a great chain right now. We're working well with it.
I will say, after having heard all that, it is all still very confusing to anyone else that has no idea maybe what EOS is or what Ethereum is or what Tron is, and these names keep on coming up. They're not going to stop coming up. What's going to start happening is hopefully people will start using them. Ideally, people won't even know that there is a blockchain behind it. Really, we can look at these things as trust networks, and we'll determine the required amount of trust for the ownership of the type of asset that's on it. So, it is exciting that they're building platforms to make it easier to use, to where you don't have to know you're using a blockchain. And that's what's going to be important when we get the consumers to be using the platforms themselves and driving value from it. So really exciting. Andy over here with Engine is working on, I think we got to go this way, John. You've got enough room? Perfect. Andy is working on a games engine and SDK platform for developers to more easily create these assets using the Unreal Engine. What other engines are you guys using right now? You gotta turn it on.
So currently we have a Unity SDK and one out for Godot. We're working on one for Unreal later this year. But yeah, that's correct. Engine is primarily a tools provider, so we have open source tools that game developers come and they say, blockchain gaming sounds cool. I really like the idea of item interoperability. I really like the idea of giving people financial sovereignty and the ability to perhaps pursue their passions after college when their parents kick them out of the house and start having to pay their own
Andy, that sounds like a personal story.
It is a personal story, and that's why I'm with Engine. Actually, I started my Engine journey a year ago today when we had a booth 2300. So just a huge gamer, and I see that
there's a lot of freedom that comes when you're able to create your own assets and be able to create.
There's so much. It's if I end up crying on the stage at E3, that's going to be something embarrassing. But it usually happens when I start talking about this sort of stuff. So all of these guys are very technically minded, and I have some web development experience, but I can't get into. I'm not going to be able to say like defend Ethereum's speed right now. Like those are all things that we all need to work on, right? So I can't speak on what this is going to mean for people, and I think that's what people in the audience actually care about. So what does this mean? What is blockchain gaming going to mean for people? So, for example, you were mentioning lots of people. So, as Americans, we tend to localize our scope of understanding, right? Where it's like, oh, well, how am I going to make a living off of blockchain items? Well, think of someone in India where the cost of living and is much lower, and they don't have as many options to, say, pursue a living that is perhaps safe for themselves or can provide enough revenue for their family. So the most recent example, now I'm going off onto a spiel, but like Mount Everest, right? They just had a news article like 2 weeks ago. All these billionaires and millionaires are stuck on Mount Everest trying to get to the top, and all these Sherpas, basically every year they have to risk their lives to take these millionaires and billionaires up a mountain, and they don't want to do that. And so if we can give them a way to play games or to pursue their passions in a way that is safe for themselves, blockchain gaming can literally save people's lives. And that's way far in the future, but it's like this is what this could potentially mean for people. And that's, anyways, yeah. You might need to give me a minute.
Thank you, Andy. It's what a lot of us are excited about is the redistribution of what we call assets and value, and being able to create community assets that can generate value freely. The underpinning of a lot of these networks came from the decentralization of money and the idea that we could create crypto assets without central banks, to where we could freely control networks to be able to move that without risk of central banking or governments taking and generating values that weren't real, weren't actual. So now we're moving that into the other types of digital assets. And so being able to create and generate value across these networks might look radically different. And it might not mean as much to us in America, but out of the 8 billion people in the world, 6.5 billion are underbanked, and about 3.3 billion are completely unbanked and have no access to storing or transferring value at all. So trying to create new systems for them to be able to do that are not controlled by central authorities is what a lot of the underlying sentiment, tone, and movement is about. Using the technology that might not just be currency. So one of the things that I talk about when you think about crypto is a lot of people just think about cryptocurrency, and that is really, we've moved way beyond that. In the last 10 years of having these Byzantine fault-tolerant networks, we now have been able to create many different types of value denotation on these networks, and those will provide value to the users that are using them. Some of the people that might be trading on the Wax platform, you literally can create and generate value much like you would on the stock market by buying, selling, trading different assets that are going to be on Wax's global platform for digital assets. Being able to, as an artist or a game developer at Blockade, being able to create unique digital, beautiful assets, and being able to not only sell them one time, but maybe have contribution anytime that's resold go back to you. So you're not actually completely losing the value as an artist, that if you have a popular item that continues to sell, you might still be able to retain value throughout that system. As an independent game designer, game developer, creating new types of engines that exercise provably fair gaming is something that we can do now. Right now with the central control of the gaming systems and central control of most value creation on the internet, we are left to the will and good hope that these companies are going to treat that asset retention and value retention in the best of our beliefs and abilities, and I don't trust that. I never have, and I don't trust Facebook to run our global networks. I don't trust Amazon to run all of our data centers. We need to be able to do this in a more decentralized way. Bringing in the best of the talents of current gaming networks and systems, like John has done with Blankos, is important. The big migration of value to these networks hasn't happened. Everyone, though you may not have made, got in early on Bitcoin. I would argue it's still super early. Though you may not have been on the Ethereum network yet, it doesn't mean that you cannot start learning about these networks and learn about this movement of finance and movement of digital ownership to these networks. And you'll recognize that a lot of amazing people in many different industries are all doing that, because once you start to understand creating trust networks without an intermediary or a central control, a lot of us get very passionate about what that means and how we might build the networks to be able to utilize that and capture that value. So, the youth of the world, the youth of not only America, but the developer independent communities want to be able to have ownership, equity, equality. These are things that go hand in hand. And we've moved away from the ownership in communities to these centralized organizations that we have to trust. I don't want to trust them. I want to not trust all of you and run a network where we control the way that the value creation is occurring. So if anyone has any questions at all, I'm going to open this up a little bit to questions. Justin Wu, question.
With the direction that gaming is going with 5G and cloud gaming, it seems like everything is going to be centralized potentially. Do you see that as an issue for decentralized gaming and assets, where if Xbox creates their own chain and you don't pay them or pay transactions, and they don't want things off asset or off platform from an Xbox game to go to a Sony chain, do you see that as a big challenge for decentralized gaming?
I'm going to just take that real quick in the fact that we're going to hopefully all be voting with our own dollars, and we're going to demand that really the use for this, the global coin. When you look at Facebook and what they're doing to potentially centralize all currency value in the world, these are the type of things. This technology isn't going to be all good. It could lead to some evil. It could lead to some problems. So we have to be very aware and apparent of this. Anyone else want to comment, John?
I think we're seeing a couple transitions right now, and in general, not just necessarily just gaming, but in blockchain in general, right? So you have it's kind of going through a traditional technology life cycle, right? You start off with the academic phase, right? And I think that Ethereum and Bitcoin have been very academic, and I think that's great, right? And the way I kind of view that, how many people ever knew about Alta Vista search engine? Do you guys do that? Yeah. How many people still use Alta Vista search engine? Exactly. So it was a very academic project, right? It was great tech, and it kind of led to Google, right? And it led to Yahoo and these other ones. So I think we're in that phase. We just kind of are closing out the academic phase, and now we're kind of moving into the big boys are now coming in using the tech. And I think that's a great thing. Facebook using blockchain technology, even if it's centralized, I think is amazing, right? Line's jumping into this space, Tencent's jumping into this space, Kakao's jumping in this space. Microsoft has the Azure blockchain. They're mostly centralized, but they're using a decentralized tech stack, right? That's a good thing for everybody, right? Because then it lends, once you're on that technology platform, then you can start doing more decentralized things, right? And I think we're seeing a transition into that, and I think, that's just where I think we're at right now. So I think it's an amazing thing that Facebook's coming in. It's an amazing thing that Tencent, these guys are coming in, because they're using the technology to make more decentralized applications in the future. So that's the way I view it, is that whether it's Xbox or it's JP Morgan, right? It's the same kind of concept that we're kind of moving into that next era, and that's a great thing for everybody. Even if it doesn't solve the decentralization right now, it can lead to that in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely a migration, and the names you just talked about, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the JPMs, these are the organizations that are building on these platforms. Everett?
So when you have smaller indie studios working with or against, in some cases, distributors like Apple and Google to try and get on the App Store, you get stuck. You get to a point where Apple and Google are sitting there saying, well, you're going to cut into our microtransaction 30% cut or whatever the insane numbers are that they have right now. That charges
35%.
And it fluctuates a little bit depending on what it is, I think. But players, you guys as players, are the ones that ultimately have to pay for that, because we as studios have to pay our people to create content for you, and then also satisfy these like every hand that's in the middle. So when you combine something like a blockchain with payment systems, you can actually just give an automated portion of revenue to these other companies via tokens. You can avoid paying them entirely if you can somehow get them to host your app without including a microtransaction model that's in the game or in the service, and you can move that elsewhere. But most importantly, the decentralization of these games and the openness of these tool sets really gives more and more people the ability to participate in the creation of the game or affect the direction of the game. Whereas, Blizzard and EA and all these companies are walled gardens. They're just a giant room of people with spreadsheets saying this bullet should hit for this much damage, and if you've got armor on, it hits for that much damage. But if you're all sitting there with your friends and you're watching streams and you're watching your favorite streamer on Twitch and you're doing all these things, you're seeing people in chat going, oh, OP, 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 OP is the Twitch spam. Those people can now, should now be able to say, okay, yes, this is OP because this cooldown on this ability is 5 seconds. It should be 6.5 seconds, and that will, alleviate these issues. So when you say value, you have value in both opinion and community thought in addition to monetary value. So it's important you get both.
There's a lot of new styles of gaming that will be based upon being able to have and remove value from other players, whether you're a player or not. And there's another interesting aspect. Malcolm?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think centralization is a solid approach to starting a business so that you can control the user experience, you can control the flow that the whole value proposition delivers, and then decentralization becomes the extension of it once it works. Because once something's decentralized, it's the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, we've gone through this with EOS. EOS and its governance model, for example, has been very, very difficult to put back in the bottle and adjust. Once it's in the hands of a whole bunch of people, you just can't adjust it. So we're seeing like Casper Labs, and we're seeing these other chains of or even our approach with delegated proof of stake. We look at the lessons that we've learned from other chains, and we say we're going to apply that to what we launch. And the one piece of advice we got from the core developers at EOS was, don't let all the horses out of the barn day one. Let them out one at a time, and as you see what works, then you, of course, open it up to everyone. So like when we launch our mainnet, we're only gonna have 3 block producers. Eventually we'll have 21, and then all the ones in waiting like everyone else. But we're doing governance based upon the knowledge of what doesn't work when it gets decentralized too fast. And so I know a lot of us from the blockchain ecosystem are, in some ways we're religious. Decentralization, but decentralization to the detriment of a customer's experience doesn't help anyone because those businesses fail.
Now, I will mention that if people are hearing the term decentralization for the first time here, there's a great book on the history of decentralized organizations and cultures called The Starfish and the Spider. It's a very easy read, and if anyone hasn't heard about that book yet and wants to learn a little bit more about decentralization, The Starfish and the Spider is a good tale of where we've been in different decentralized communities over the last several 100,000 years.
Yeah, and then I want to just kind of follow up on what Malcolm was saying. That's the starting centralized is exactly how we are helping to improve the UX, like the user experience around these games, right? So with Neon District, we've centralized a lot of that early content creation. We actually do custodial wallets, if you explain that in a minute. We actually start with custodial wallets, and we let the users play a regular game until they're ready to graduate to real blockchain stuff, and then we push them out into mainnet and all of that kind of stuff. Additionally, we're working with the just where the technology is right now, kind of going back to what John was saying, how it's kind of early and there's lots of chaos out there, and so in order to kind of work nicely with that, we're drawing a clean line between what we put on the blockchain and what we don't, right? So you don't want to throw your entire game on the blockchain and you're ending up paying gas fees for every stupid little action you're doing.
Network usage fees would probably be a better term across whatever
fees.
Network it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Distributed compute networks take power, take systems to run, and there has to be some people that do get paid to run these things.
Somebody somewhere has to be compensated for all this work that's happening. Right, exactly. And so you want to keep that as clean as possible. And so having things that are very blockchain compatible, like the in-game assets, right? Your characters, all of these things that are durable digital goods. Having those on the blockchain makes a lot of sense. Having your game's business logic rules on the blockchain is is dumb. Like that's a giant pile of dumb.
With the exception of things like gambling games, where having the logic on your game is not only the right thing to do.
I'm talking about like out on mainnet.
Absolutely,
like, that's crazy.
absolutely.
But if you build it like what Everett's doing, right? Like so where you actually build it so that it works that way, like that's a different story altogether.
Yeah.
But he's kind of leading edge. Like
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
But historically speaking, it's just dumb to put all your stuff out there and you're paying your transaction fees for every little move you make. I mean it's crazy. Nobody's going to use that.
So to say that this industry is moving fast would be an understatement. It's really gone out and gobbled up so much of the attention of value creation, and that doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. We have had these cycle systems of interest and then drastic volatile valuation crashes, and then interest in new development brings us higher. And it seems every 2 years we go through these cycles as we're developing these networks out. So what our interest today was to come and at least spread the word about these systems, introduce some of these projects to everyone here about, and to go understand what decentralized networks might mean to gaming is an evolution that we will all be a part of over the next 5 years. And if you go research and go check any of it out, I think you might be interested as well. So I want to just thank everybody who's been up here on stage and the work that they've done to help create these networks and help educate people about the value of these things has been so very important. So again, appreciate it. If you're interested in decentralization, talk to any of these gentlemen here, understanding and owning and retaining digital asset value and where that might lead. Thank you all.